The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and broken dreams. Elena stood at the foot of the bed, staring at the man she was supposed to marry tomorrow. His chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, kept alive by machines that beeped and hummed in the sterile silence. This was Adrian Blackwell, heir to a billion-dollar empire, and he had been sleeping for 3 years. Her hands shook as she held the marriage certificate. The papers felt heavy, heavier than they should for something made of simple paper. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Blackwell in a ceremony where the groom couldn't even say, "I do." The thought made her stomach turn. "It's just for 1 year," her father had said, his voice desperate. "Just until we can pay off the debts. The Blackwell family is offering $5 million. $5 million, Elena. That's enough to save our house, pay for your mother's treatments, and give us a fresh start." Elena had wanted to scream. She had wanted to run. But when she looked at her mother's medical bills piling up on the kitchen table, when she saw her father's shoulders sagging under the weight of their financial ruin, she knew she had no choice. Now, standing in this cold room, she wondered if this was what selling your soul felt like. Adrian looked peaceful, almost handsome in his stillness. His dark hair was perfectly combed, his face clean-shaven by the nurses who cared for him. He was only 28, just 3 years older than her, but he looked younger somehow, untouched by the world's cruelty. He was in a car accident, his mother, Mrs. Victoria Blackwell, had explained during their first meeting. The doctors say his brain activity is normal, but something is keeping him from waking up. We've tried everything. Every specialist, every treatment, every prayer. Her voice had cracked then, and Elena had seen the pain behind the woman's perfect makeup. "Why me?" Elena had asked. "Why would you want your son to marry a stranger?" Mrs. Blackwell had looked her up and down, taking in Elena's simple clothes and worn shoes. "Because you need us, and we need someone who won't take advantage of our situation. Someone who won't try to steal his fortune while he can't protect himself. Someone who will sign the papers and walk away when the year is over." It sounded so simple when she put it that way. Just a business transaction. Nothing more. But standing here now, Elena felt like she was about to commit a terrible crime. This man had never chosen her. He didn't even know she existed. Tomorrow she would promise to love and cherish someone who couldn't love her back, someone who might never wake up to realize what had been done in his name. The door opened behind her, and Mrs. Blackwell walked in with her usual perfect posture. She wore an expensive black dress and pearls that probably cost more than Elena's family made in a year. "Having second thoughts?" Mrs. Blackwell asked, her voice sharp. Elena turned around. "Wouldn't you?" "No," Mrs. Blackwell said firmly. "This arrangement helps everyone. Your family gets the money they desperately need. Adrian gets protection from the fortune hunters and gold diggers who have been circling like vultures since his accident. And I get peace of mind knowing someone trustworthy is looking after his interests." "But it's not real," Elena whispered. Mrs. Blackwell's expression softened slightly. "Real marriages fall apart every day, dear. At least this one is honest about what it is." Elena looked back at Adrian. In the 3 weeks since she had agreed to this arrangement, she had visited him every other day. At first it felt wrong, like she was intruding on something private, but gradually she had started talking to him. About her day, about her fears, about the books she was reading. The nurses said it might help, that comatose patients could sometimes hear things. She had told him about her job as a librarian, about how she loved the quiet and the smell of old books. She had told him about her mother's cancer and her father's failed business. She had even told him about her dreams of traveling the world someday, of seeing the places she had only read about in books. Of course he had never responded. But sometimes, when the room was very quiet, she could pretend that he was listening. "The ceremony is at 10 tomorrow morning," Mrs. Blackwell said. "The judge will come here to the hospital. It will be quick and simple." Elena nodded. She had already picked out a simple white dress from her closet. Nothing fancy, nothing that would pretend this was a real wedding. Her parents would be there, along with Mrs. Blackwell and a few witnesses. Adrian would lie in his bed, unaware that his life was about to change. After Mrs. Blackwell left, Elena sat down in the chair beside Adrian's bed. She had grown used to this routine. The nurses knew her now and didn't question her presence. "I'm sorry," she whispered to him. "I'm sorry this is happening to you. I'm sorry you don't get to choose. I promise I'll try to take care of things the way you would want. I promise I won't take advantage." She reached out and touched his hand. It was warm but lifeless, like touching a statue. "Maybe someday you'll wake up and understand why we did this. Maybe you'll even forgive us." The machines continued their steady rhythm. Elena sat there for another hour, watching his peaceful face and wondering what kind of man he had been before the accident. Mrs. Blackwell had shown her pictures: Adrian at charity events, Adrian at business meetings, Adrian traveling the world. He had looked confident and happy, surrounded by friends and success. Now he was trapped in his own body, dependent on others for everything. And tomorrow one of those others would become his wife. Elena finally stood up to leave. Tomorrow would change everything for both of them, and neither of them was truly ready for it. But sometimes life didn't ask if you were ready. Sometimes it just happened whether you wanted it to or not. As she walked to the door, she thought she heard something, a small sound like a sigh. She turned around quickly, but Adrian looked exactly the same. The machines beeped steadily. Nothing had changed. "Goodbye, Adrian," she whispered. "I'll see you tomorrow." She left the hospital with her heart heavy and her future uncertain. In less than 24 hours, she would be married to a man who couldn't even know her name. It wasn't the wedding she had dreamed of as a little girl, but dreams were luxuries she couldn't afford anymore. Tomorrow she would become Elena Blackwell and her real life would begin. The wedding dress felt foreign against Elena's skin. She had bought it 2 years ago for another wedding that never happened. Her engagement to Tom had ended when he decided he wasn't ready for marriage. Now, as she stared at herself in the hospital bathroom mirror, she wondered if this white dress was cursed. Her mother had helped her with her hair that morning, braiding it into a simple style with small white flowers. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," her mother had said, but Elena could see the worry in her eyes. They both knew this wasn't how weddings were supposed to be. Through the bathroom door, Elena could hear voices in Adrian's room. The judge had arrived early, along with Mrs. Blackwell's lawyer and a photographer who would document this strange ceremony. Her parents were there too, sitting quietly in the corner like they were attending a funeral instead of a wedding. Elena took a deep breath and opened the door. The room had been decorated with a few flowers, probably Mrs. Blackwell's attempt to make this feel more normal. But nothing could make this normal. The groom was lying unconscious in a hospital bed, attached to machines that kept him alive. "Are you ready, dear?" Mrs. Blackwell asked. She looked perfectly composed, as if she attended weddings like this every day. Elena nodded and walked to Adrian's bedside. The judge, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, opened her book and began the ceremony. "We are gathered here today to witness the marriage of Elena Martinez and Adrian Blackwell," she said formally. Her voice echoed strangely in the quiet room. Elena's hands were shaking as she listened to the familiar words. "Love, honor, cherish in sickness and in health till death do us part." Each promise felt like a lie, but she spoke them anyway because she had to. Because her family needed her to. When it came time for Adrian's vows, Mrs. Blackwell stepped forward. "Adrian, in his current condition, obviously cannot speak for himself. But I am authorized by law to act on his behalf in this matter." The judge nodded and continued. Elena slipped the wedding ring onto Adrian's finger. It was a simple gold band, nothing fancy. Her own ring was equally simple. They weren't pretending this was about love. "By the power vested in me by the state, I now pronounce you husband and wife," the judge said. And just like that, it was over. Elena was married to a man who didn't even know her name. The photographer took a few pictures. Elena standing beside the bed, Elena holding Adrian's hand, Elena with her new mother-in-law. Each flash felt like evidence of something shameful. After the ceremony, everyone left except Elena and Mrs. Blackwell. The older woman handed Elena a thick envelope. "This is your copy of all the legal documents," she said. "Bank information, medical directives, everything you need to know about managing Adrian's affairs. There's also a credit card with your name on it, for household expenses and emergencies." Elena stared at the envelope. "I don't know how to manage a billionaire's life." "You don't have to manage everything," Mrs. Blackwell assured her. "The business runs itself mostly. Adrian's assistant, Sarah, handles most of the day-to-day operations. You just need to make medical decisions if necessary and sign papers when the lawyers need you to." "What if he wakes up?" Elena asked. "What if he's angry about what we've done?" Mrs. Blackwell's face tightened. "He's not going to wake up, Elena. The doctors have been very clear about that. His brain activity is stable, but there's no sign of consciousness returning. This arrangement is for his protection, nothing more." After Mrs. Blackwell left, Elena found herself alone with her new husband for the first time as his wife. The title felt strange and wrong. She sat down in the familiar chair beside his bed. "Well, we're married now," she said softly. "I guess that makes me Elena Blackwell. It sounds weird, doesn't it?" She looked at his face, searching for any sign that he could hear her. The doctors said comatose patients sometimes responded to familiar voices, but Adrian's expression never changed. He looked peaceful, like he was having pleasant dreams. "I want you to know that I'm going to try to do right by you," she continued. "I'm not going to spend your money on myself or change things you wouldn't want changed. I'm just going to take care of things until whatever happens next." A nurse came in to check on Adrian, smiling at Elena. "Congratulations, Mrs. Blackwell. He looks very peaceful today." Mrs. Blackwell. Elena wasn't sure she would ever get used to that name. That afternoon, Elena went to see Adrian's penthouse apartment for the first time. Mrs. Blackwell had given her the keys and the security codes, explaining that she was now legally entitled to live there. The apartment was on the top floor of one of the city's most expensive buildings. When Elena walked in, she felt like she was entering a museum. Everything was perfect: expensive furniture, original artwork on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the entire city. She walked through the rooms slowly, trying to get a sense of who Adrian had been. His bedroom was simple but elegant, with a king-sized bed and a walk-in closet full of expensive suits. His office was lined with books, business texts, biographies, but also novels and poetry. That surprised her. In the living room, she found photo albums on a shelf. She sat down on the leather couch and opened one, seeing Adrian's life spread out in pictures. Him as a child with his parents, him in college with friends, him at business events and charity galas. In every picture he looked confident and happy, surrounded by people who seemed to genuinely care about him. There were pictures of him with women too, beautiful women in elegant dresses at fancy parties. Elena wondered if any of them had loved him, if any of them were heartbroken when he disappeared from their lives after the accident. She closed the album and looked around the apartment again. This was her home now, at least for the next year. But it didn't feel like home. It felt like she was house-sitting for someone who might come back at any moment. That night, Elena lay in the guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling. She had called her parents to let them know she was settling in, but she hadn't told them how strange and lonely it felt. Her mother was already planning what to do with the money: pay off the medical bills, fix the roof, maybe even take a small vacation when she was feeling better. Elena was happy her family would be okay, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had sold something important to make it happen. Her freedom, maybe. Or her chance at real love. She thought about Adrian, lying alone in his hospital bed just a few miles away. Did he dream? Did some part of him know that his life had changed today? Did he mind that a stranger was now sleeping in his apartment, wearing his name, making decisions about his future? "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm sorry we didn't ask what you wanted." But the apartment stayed silent, and Elena eventually fell into an uneasy sleep, wondering what tomorrow would bring for Adrian Blackwell's unexpected wife. Elena's new routine began the next morning. She woke up in Adrian's guest bedroom, made coffee in his expensive kitchen, and tried to figure out how to live someone else's life. The first challenge came when Adrian's assistant, Sarah, called at 8 in the morning. Sarah was an efficient woman in her 40s who had worked for Adrian for 5 years before his accident. "Mrs. Blackwell," Sarah said, and Elena still felt startled by the name. "I need your signature on some contracts today. And there's a board meeting next week that requires a family representative." "I don't know anything about business," Elena said honestly. "You don't need to," Sarah assured her. "I'll handle everything. You just need to show up and sign where I tell you to sign. Think of yourself as Adrian's stand-in." That afternoon, Elena went to the Blackwell Industries building for the first time. It was a glass tower in the heart of downtown, with Adrian's name engraved in marble in the lobby. Everyone seemed to know who she was. Security guards nodded respectfully, elevator operators smiled politely, employees she passed in the hallways looked curious but careful. Sarah met her on the 42nd floor, in what had been Adrian's office. It was a corner office with windows on 2 sides, filled with awards and photos from business deals. Adrian's chair sat empty behind his desk, like he might walk in at any moment. "The company has been running smoothly," Sarah explained as Elena signed papers she didn't understand. "Adrian built a good team before his accident. Most decisions can be made without family input, but a few things require a Blackwell signature." Elena signed her new name carefully on each document. It still felt like forgery. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said when they were finished. "Of course. What was he like? Adrian, before the accident?" Sarah's face softened. "He was a good boss. Fair, smart, actually cared about the people who worked for him. He worked too much, but he was passionate about what he did. He wanted to build something that would last, something that would help people." "Did he have a girlfriend? Someone special?" Sarah hesitated. There was someone he'd been seeing for a few months before the accident. Rebecca Chase. But it wasn't serious, at least not on his end. She came around the hospital a few times after the accident, but... Sarah shrugged. I think she realized he wasn't going to wake up and give her the lifestyle she wanted. Elena felt a stab of anger at this Rebecca person, but she pushed it away. She had no right to be protective of Adrian. She barely knew him herself. That evening, Elena visited Adrian as she had every day since the wedding. She sat in her usual chair and told him about her day, about signing papers she didn't understand, about his office and his assistant, about how strange it felt to use his name. Sarah says you were a good boss, she said to his still form. She misses you. I think a lot of people do. She had brought one of his books from the apartment, a collection of poetry by Pablo Neruda. It had surprised her to find poetry on Adrian's shelves, mixed in with all the business books. I thought I'd read to you, she said. The nurses say it might help hearing familiar things. She opened the book randomly and began to read. The poems were beautiful and sad, full of longing and loss. As she read, she found herself looking at Adrian's face, wondering if he had loved these words, if they had meant something special to him. After an hour, she closed the book and prepared to leave. But as she stood up, she thought she saw something, a tiny movement of his fingers, so small she might have imagined it. She sat back down and took his hand. Adrian? Can you hear me? Nothing. His hand was as still as always, his face peaceful and blank. Elena decided she had imagined it, wishful thinking brought on by hours of one-sided conversation. Over the following weeks, Elena settled into her strange new life. She spent mornings handling Adrian's business affairs with Sarah's help, afternoons at the hospital reading to him or just sitting quietly, and evenings alone in his apartment trying to feel at home. She learned things about Adrian through his belongings. He donated money to literacy programs and children's hospitals. He had traveled extensively, his passport was full of stamps from countries around the world. He played piano, though not very well based on the beginner's books on the music stand. He loved old movies, judging by his DVD collection. Slowly, Elena began to feel protective of this man she had never met while he was awake. When his lawyer called with updates about business deals, she asked careful questions to make sure everything was in Adrian's best interest. When the hospital staff talked about long-term care options, she insisted on the best possible treatment. You're taking this very seriously, Mrs. Blackwell observed during one of her visits to the hospital. Shouldn't I? Elena asked. I suppose I expected you to be more detached. This is just a business arrangement after all. Elena looked at Adrian lying peacefully in his bed. He's still a person. He deserves to be cared about. Mrs. Blackwell studied her carefully. You're not falling in love with him, are you? That would complicate things considerably. Elena felt her cheeks burn. How can I fall in love with someone I've never had a conversation with? But as the words left her mouth, she wondered if they were entirely true. She had spent hours talking to Adrian, sharing her thoughts and fears and dreams. True, he had never responded, but she had grown attached to his quiet presence, to the routine of caring for someone who couldn't care for himself. Just remember, Mrs. Blackwell said gently, this arrangement has an end date. Don't get so attached that you can't walk away when the time comes. That night, Elena lay in bed thinking about Mrs. Blackwell's warning. Was she getting too attached? She thought about her life before the marriage, her small apartment, her quiet job at the library, her simple routine. That life seemed very far away now. She had told her friends that she was taking a year off to care for a sick relative. It wasn't entirely a lie, though Adrian wasn't really her relative and their relationship was nothing like what she had implied. She missed her friends, missed the library, missed the simplicity of her old life. But she didn't miss the constant worry about money, the sleepless nights wondering how to pay her mother's medical bills, the feeling of helplessness as her family's situation got worse and worse. This arrangement had saved her family. Whatever else happened that made it worthwhile. Still, as she drifted off to sleep, Elena found herself wondering what Adrian would think of the life she was living in his name. Would he approve of the decisions she was making? Would he understand why she had agreed to marry him? Would he be angry when he woke up? If he woke up. 3 months into their strange marriage, Elena had developed a comfortable routine. She handled Adrian's business affairs in the mornings, spent afternoons at the hospital, and used evenings to explore the life he had built before his accident. She had become friendly with Dr. Roberts, Adrian's neurologist, who updated her weekly on his condition. The news was always the same, stable but unchanged. His brain activity remained normal, but there were no signs of emerging consciousness. Is there any chance he could wake up? Elena asked during one of their meetings. Dr. Roberts looked tired. He had been caring for Adrian since the accident and was clearly frustrated by the lack of progress. There's always a chance with traumatic brain injuries. We've seen patients wake up after months or even years. But after 3 years? He shrugged. The longer he remains unconscious, the less likely recovery becomes. Elena nodded, but she refused to give up hope entirely. She had started bringing different things to read to Adrian, news articles about his company, updates on the business deals he had been working on before the accident, books from his personal collection. She told herself it was therapy for him, but truthfully, it made her feel less alone. One afternoon, she was reading him an article about a new literacy program his company was funding when she noticed something. Adrian's eyelids fluttered, just for a moment. It was so brief she almost missed it. Elena stopped reading and leaned closer. Adrian? Did you hear that? Nothing. His face was as peaceful as ever. But Elena was sure she had seen something. She continued reading, watching his face carefully. When she mentioned the children who would benefit from the literacy program, she saw it again. A tiny flutter of his eyelids, like he was trying to wake up from a deep sleep. Elena's heart began to race. She pressed the call button for the nurse. What's wrong? Nurse Janet asked when she hurried in. I think I saw his eyes move, Elena said breathlessly. Just small movements, but definitely movement. Janet checked Adrian's vital signs and examined his eyes with a small flashlight. Everything looks normal, she said gently. Sometimes family members think they see responses that aren't really there. It's very common. Elena wanted to argue, but she knew how it sounded. The hopeful wife imagining progress that wasn't really happening. After Janet left, Elena sat back down and studied Adrian's face. I know I saw something, she whispered to him. I know you're in there somewhere. She decided not to tell Mrs. Blackwell or Dr. Roberts about what she thought she had seen. They would just give her pitying looks and gentle lectures about false hope. Instead, she began paying even closer attention during her visits, looking for any sign that Adrian was aware of her presence. Over the next few weeks, Elena became convinced that Adrian responded to certain things more than others. When she read him news about his business, his breathing seemed to change slightly. When she talked about the children's programs he had funded, she was almost sure she saw tiny facial expressions. But the responses were so subtle that she began to doubt herself. Was she seeing what she wanted to see? Was the loneliness of her situation making her imagine things? Meanwhile, Elena's life outside the hospital was becoming more complicated. She had been invited to several charity events as Adrian's representative, and she found these social obligations terrifying. She had never moved in wealthy circles, and she felt like an imposter among Adrian's former friends and colleagues. At a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital, Elena found herself talking to Rebecca Chase, the woman Sarah had mentioned as Adrian's former girlfriend. Rebecca was everything Elena wasn't: tall, blonde, sophisticated, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Elena's car. So you're Adrian's wife, Rebecca said, looking Elena up and down with obvious confusion. I have to say, you're not what I expected. What did you expect? Elena asked. Rebecca smiled coldly. Someone more suitable. Adrian always had excellent taste in women. Elena felt her temper rise. I think Adrian's taste was fine. Of course, he couldn't exactly choose you himself, could he? Rebecca continued. How convenient for you that he can't object to this arrangement. Before Elena could respond, Sarah appeared at her elbow. Mrs. Blackwell, they're ready for your speech. Elena had forgotten she was supposed to give a speech representing Adrian's company. She walked to the podium on shaking legs, looking out at a room full of wealthy strangers who were all wondering who she was and why she was speaking for Adrian Blackwell. Good evening, she began, her voice barely audible. She cleared her throat and tried again. Good evening. I'm Elena Blackwell, and I'm here tonight on behalf of my husband Adrian and Blackwell Industries. She had practiced this speech for days, but now her mind went blank. She looked out at the sea of faces and felt panic rising in her chest. Then she thought about Adrian lying alone in his hospital bed. She thought about the children who would benefit from the money raised tonight, about the literacy programs he had funded, about the kind of man he seemed to be based on his charitable giving. Adrian can't be here tonight, she said, her voice growing stronger. But if he could, I know he would want you to know how much these programs mean to him. He believes that education is the key to changing lives, and he's committed to making sure every child has access to books and learning opportunities. She talked about the specific programs Blackwell Industries supported, about the children who had learned to read because of Adrian's donations, about the hospitals that provided better care because of his funding. As she spoke, she felt connected to Adrian in a way she never had before. She was speaking his words, sharing his values, representing his heart. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. People came up to her afterward to shake her hand and praise her speech. But the person she most wanted to talk to couldn't hear her. That night, Elena visited Adrian even though it was later than usual. The hospital was quiet, most of the visitors gone home to their normal lives. "I gave a speech tonight," she told him as she sat in her familiar chair. "About your charity work. I was terrified, but I think it went well. People seem to understand how much you care about helping others." She studied his face in the dim light from the hallway. "Rebecca was there. Your ex-girlfriend. She doesn't think much of me, but I don't think I care what she thinks." Elena reached out and took Adrian's hand, something she had started doing without really thinking about it. "I wish you could have been there tonight. I wish you could tell me if I represented you the way you would have wanted." As she held his hand, Elena felt something that made her heart stop. Adrian's fingers moved, just slightly but definitely moved. It wasn't her imagination this time. She was holding his hand and she felt it respond to her touch. "Adrian," she whispered. His fingers moved again, a gentle squeeze that lasted only a second. Elena sat frozen, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. After a long moment, she squeezed his hand back, and felt him respond with another tiny pressure. Tears began to stream down her face. "You can hear me," she whispered. "You're in there, aren't you?" For the first time since their strange marriage began, Elena felt like she was actually talking to her husband instead of talking to herself. And for the first time she realized that she desperately wanted him to wake up, not just for his sake but for hers. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay in Adrian's guest bed, staring at the ceiling and replaying those moments when his hand had squeezed hers. By morning she had convinced herself it had been real, not her imagination or wishful thinking. She called Dr. Roberts first thing in the morning. "I need to see you," she said. "About Adrian. Something happened last night." An hour later she sat in Dr. Roberts' office, trying to explain what she had experienced. "His hand squeezed mine," she said. "Not once but several times. It was a response to what I was saying." Dr. Roberts looked skeptical. "Mrs. Blackwell, I understand how much you want to see progress, but involuntary muscle movements are very common in comatose patients. What you felt might have been a spasm or reflex, not a conscious response." "It wasn't a spasm," Elena insisted. "It was gentle, deliberate. He was responding to me." "Even if that were true," Dr. Roberts said carefully, "a hand squeeze wouldn't necessarily indicate consciousness. Many comatose patients can perform simple motor responses without being aware." Elena felt frustration building in her chest. "Can't you test him? Run some kind of scan to see if his brain activity has changed?" Dr. Roberts sighed. "We can do another EEG, but Mrs. Blackwell, I don't want you to get your hopes up. After 3 years, the chances of significant recovery are very small." "But not impossible?" "Not impossible," he admitted. "But very unlikely." Elena left the doctor's office feeling defeated but not deterred. She went straight to the hospital and found Adrian's room buzzing with activity. The nurses were changing his bedding and checking his monitors. "Is everything okay?" Elena asked. "Everything's fine," Nurse Janet assured her. "Just routine care. Although I should mention, his vital signs were a bit elevated last night around the time you were here. Nothing dangerous, just slightly higher heart rate and blood pressure." Elena's pulse quickened. Could that mean something? It could mean lots of things. Sometimes patients respond to familiar voices or touch, even when they're not conscious. It's not unusual. After the nurses left, Elena sat down beside Adrian's bed. In the daylight he looked exactly the same as always, peaceful, still, unaware. But Elena was now convinced that some part of him was listening. "The doctor thinks I'm imagining things," she told him softly. "But I know what I felt last night. I know you were responding to me." She picked up his hand and held it gently. "If you can hear me, squeeze my hand again." Nothing happened for a long moment. Elena waited, barely breathing. Then, so faintly she almost missed it, she felt the slightest pressure from his fingers. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You are in there." Over the next few days, Elena experimented carefully. She discovered that Adrian seemed to respond more when she talked about certain subjects. His business, his charitable work, his family. When she read him poetry or talked about books, his breathing seemed to change slightly. When she held his hand and asked direct questions, she sometimes felt those tiny squeezes. But the responses were so subtle that Elena began to doubt herself again. Was she so desperate for connection that she was imagining responses that weren't really there? She decided to test her theory more systematically. One afternoon she brought a notebook and started keeping track. "Adrian, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand once for yes and twice for no," she said. She felt one gentle squeeze. Elena's heart raced. She wrote down the time and the response. "Are you in pain?" she asked. 2 squeezes. "No." "Are you aware of where you are?" 1 squeeze. "Yes." Elena's hands were shaking as she wrote this down. She asked several more questions, getting consistent responses that seemed to indicate awareness and understanding. "Are you angry about our marriage?" she asked finally, the question she had been afraid to voice. A long pause. Then 2 gentle squeezes. "No." Elena felt tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm so sorry you couldn't choose." She felt a single squeeze, but this one was different, longer, gentler, almost comforting. That evening, Elena called Mrs. Blackwell and asked to meet with her. They met at a quiet restaurant near the hospital. "I think Adrian is waking up," Elena said without preamble. Mrs. Blackwell set down her wine glass. "What do you mean?" Elena explained about the hand squeezes, about the subtle responses she had been noticing. Mrs. Blackwell listened with growing concern. "Elena, dear, I think you may be too emotionally invested in this situation," she said gently. "It's natural to want to see progress, but you can't create progress that isn't there." "I'm not creating anything," Elena insisted. "He's responding to questions. He's aware. Have you told the doctors about this? Dr. Roberts thinks I'm imagining things." Mrs. Blackwell reached across the table and patted Elena's hand. "Sweetheart, you've been spending hours every day with an unconscious man for months. You've been living his life, handling his affairs, sleeping in his home. It's understandable that you would start to feel a connection that isn't really there." Elena pulled her hand away. "You think I'm losing my mind. I think you're a caring young woman who has gotten more involved in this situation than is healthy for you. What if you're wrong?" Elena asked. "What if he really is becoming conscious and everyone is dismissing it because it's easier than believing recovery is possible?" Mrs. Blackwell was quiet for a moment. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Support me. Help me convince the doctors to take this seriously. Get him the best neurological evaluation possible. And if the tests show no change?" Elena met her eyes. "Then I'll accept that I was wrong. But if there's even a chance that Adrian is trapped in there, aware but unable to communicate, don't we owe it to him to find out?" Mrs. Blackwell was quiet for a long time, studying Elena's face. Finally she nodded. "I'll call Dr. Roberts tomorrow. We'll get Adrian the most comprehensive evaluation possible. But Elena, if the tests show no change, I want you to promise me you'll step back from this. For your own mental health." Elena agreed, but as she walked back to Adrian's apartment that night, she felt more determined than ever to prove that her husband, and she was surprised to realize she had started thinking of him that way, was fighting his way back to consciousness. The next morning she sat beside Adrian's bed and took his hand. "They're going to run more tests," she told him. "Really thorough ones this time. If you're really in there, if you're really trying to wake up, these tests will show it." She felt a single squeeze, firm and deliberate. "I believe in you," she whispered. "And I'm not giving up." The comprehensive neurological evaluation was scheduled for the following week. Elena spent those days in a state of nervous anticipation, alternating between hope and fear. What if the test showed no change? What if everyone was right and she had been imagining Adrian's responses? But what if they were wrong? Elena continued her daily visits, and the hand squeezes became more frequent and more distinct. She started asking Adrian about his life before the accident, and his responses painted a picture of a man who had been lonely despite his success. "Did you want to get married someday?" she asked one afternoon. 1 squeeze. "Yes." "Did you want children?" 1 squeeze. "Yes." "Were you happy before the accident?" A long pause. Then 2 squeezes. "No." That answer surprised Elena. In all the photos she had seen, Adrian looked confident and successful. But maybe success and happiness weren't the same thing. "Were you lonely?" she asked gently. 1 long, slow squeeze. "Yes." Elena felt her heart break a little for this man she was just beginning to know. "I understand lonely," she told him. "I was lonely too before all this happened." She squeezed his hand and he squeezed back. "Are you less lonely now?" she asked, barely daring to voice the question. 1 squeeze. "Yes." Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes. "Me too," she whispered. The day of the tests arrived with gray skies and cold rain. Elena arrived at the hospital early and found a team of specialists preparing equipment she didn't recognize. Dr. Roberts introduced her to Dr. Sarah Chin, a neurologist who specialized in consciousness disorders. Mrs. Blackwell has requested the most comprehensive evaluation we can provide, Dr. Chin explained. We'll be doing advanced EEG monitoring, functional MRI, and several other tests to measure brain activity and responses. What exactly are you looking for? Elena asked. Any signs of conscious awareness. If your husband is truly responding to stimuli in a purposeful way, these tests should detect it. The test took most of the day. Elena was allowed to stay for some of them, watching monitors that displayed Adrian's brain activity in colorful waves and patterns she couldn't interpret. During the response tests, she was asked to talk to Adrian while the machines recorded his brain's reactions. Can you squeeze my hand? Elena asked, holding Adrian's hand while electrodes monitored his brain activity. She felt the familiar gentle pressure of his fingers, and several of the technicians exchanged glances. Did you see something? Elena asked hopefully. We'll need to analyze all the data before we can draw any conclusions, Dr. Chin said diplomatically. After the tests were complete, Elena sat with Adrian while he rested. The day had been exhausting for both of them and he looked pale and tired. You did great today, she told him softly. Whatever happens, you tried your best. She felt a weak squeeze in response. 3 days later, Elena sat in Dr. Roberts' office with Mrs. Blackwell, waiting for the results. Dr. Chin was there too, along with 2 other specialists. Elena's hands were sweating as Dr. Chin opened a thick file. The results are quite remarkable, Dr. Chin began, and Elena's heart leaped. Adrian's brain scans show significant activity in areas associated with conscious thought and intentional movement. When Mrs. Blackwell spoke to him during the tests, we recorded clear responses in the brain regions responsible for language comprehension and motor planning. Elena felt like she might faint. Does that mean he's conscious? It means he's more aware than we previously thought, Dr. Roberts admitted, looking stunned. The hand squeezes you've been reporting appear to be genuine responses, not reflexes. But why hasn't he woken up completely? Mrs. Blackwell asked. Dr. Chin leaned forward. That's the interesting part. Adrian appears to be in what we call a minimally conscious state. He's aware and can respond to some stimuli, but something is still preventing him from achieving full consciousness. It's like he's trapped between sleeping and waking. Can he recover completely? Elena asked. There's definitely hope, Dr. Chin said. Patients in minimally conscious states have a much better prognosis than those in true comas. With the right stimulation and therapy, it's possible he could make significant progress. Elena felt tears of relief streaming down her face. She hadn't been imagining things. Adrian was really in there, really trying to communicate with her. What kind of therapy? Mrs. Blackwell asked. Consistent sensory stimulation, familiar voices, physical therapy to maintain muscle tone. The most important thing is continued interaction with people he cares about. Elena's mind was racing. What should I do differently? Keep doing what you've been doing, Dr. Chin said. Talk to him, read to him, include him in conversations. The fact that he responds most strongly to your voice suggests you've become an important anchor for him. That afternoon, Elena practically ran to Adrian's hospital room. She burst through the door with a huge smile on her face. Adrian, the test showed you're conscious. You're really in there. She grabbed his hand and felt an immediate, strong squeeze in response. The doctors say you might be able to recover completely. We're going to start new therapies, do everything we can to help you wake up all the way. Over the next few weeks, Adrian's care was completely transformed. Physical therapists came to move his limbs and maintain his muscle tone. Speech therapists worked with him on basic communication exercises. Music therapists played songs to stimulate different areas of his brain. Elena was there for as much of it as possible, and Adrian's responses became stronger and more consistent. The hand squeezes turned into finger movements. Sometimes his eyes would flutter open for brief moments, though he didn't seem to focus on anything yet. He's definitely improving, Dr. Chin told Elena during one of their weekly meetings. His brain activity is increasing, and his physical responses are becoming more purposeful. How long before he might wake up completely? There's no way to predict that. Could be weeks, months, or longer. But Elena, I want you to be prepared for the possibility that even if he does wake up, he might not be exactly the same person he was before the accident. Elena nodded, but privately she thought Adrian might be better than he was before. The man she was getting to know through their strange communication seemed kinder and more thoughtful than the successful businessman in all those photos. One evening, as Elena was reading to Adrian from one of his poetry books, she noticed his breathing had changed. It was deeper, more natural, less mechanical than usual. "Adrian?" she said softly. His eyelids fluttered, and for a moment, his eyes opened fully. He didn't focus on her, but Elena was sure he was seeing something. "Can you hear me?" she whispered. His eyes closed again, but she felt his hand squeeze hers firmly. "I'm here," she told him. "I'm not going anywhere. Keep fighting." As Elena walked home that night, she realized that somewhere along the way her feelings for Adrian had changed completely. What had started as a business arrangement had become something much deeper. She cared about him, worried about him, felt connected to him in ways she had never expected. She was falling in love with her husband, and he didn't even know what she looked like yet. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, it filled her with hope. If Adrian could fight his way back to consciousness, maybe they could build something real together. Maybe this strange beginning could lead to a genuine marriage. But first he had to wake up. And Elena was going to do everything in her power to help him make that journey back to the world of the living. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning in late fall. Elena had arrived at the hospital early, bringing coffee and a new book she wanted to read to Adrian. She had been telling him the story of their marriage in pieces, explaining how they had met, through an arrangement, why she had agreed to marry him, to help her family, and how she felt about him now, complicated but genuine. "I want you to know," she was saying as she settled into her usual chair, "that when you wake up, you don't have to stay married to me if you don't want to. I know you didn't choose this, and I'll understand if you want to end it." She took his hand, expecting the usual gentle squeeze. Instead, she felt his fingers move in a completely different way. He was trying to interlock their fingers like couples do when they hold hands properly. Elena's breath caught in her throat. "Adrian?" This time, when his eyes opened, they focused directly on her face. His gaze was confused and unfocused, but definitely aware. He was looking at her, really seeing her for the first time. "Oh my God," Elena whispered. "You're awake. You're actually awake." Adrian's mouth moved slightly, like he was trying to speak, but no sound came out. His eyes stayed fixed on Elena's face, taking in every detail. Elena pressed the call button frantically while keeping hold of Adrian's hand. "It's okay," she told him. "Don't try to talk yet. You've been asleep for a long time." Nurses and doctors rushed into the room. Dr. Roberts arrived within minutes, looking amazed as he examined Adrian's responses. "Adrian, can you hear me?" Dr. Roberts asked. Adrian's eyes moved to the doctor's face and he nodded very slightly. "Do you know where you are?" Adrian's gaze moved around the room, taking in the hospital equipment and medical surroundings. He nodded again. "Do you remember your accident?" This time Adrian looked confused, his forehead creasing slightly. He shook his head. Dr. Roberts looked at Elena. "This is remarkable. He's definitely conscious and aware. We'll need to run some tests to assess his cognitive function, but this is the best possible outcome." Over the next few hours, Adrian drifted in and out of full consciousness. Sometimes his eyes would close and he would seem to sleep, but now it looked like natural sleep rather than the deep unconsciousness of his coma. Elena stayed by his bedside, afraid to leave in case he woke up and didn't find her there. When Adrian's eyes opened again in the afternoon, he immediately looked for her face. "Hi," Elena said softly. "I'm Elena. I'm your wife." Adrian's eyes widened slightly. He looked confused but not upset. Elena decided to be completely honest. "You've been in a coma for 3 years since a car accident. We got married while you were unconscious. It's complicated and I'll explain everything when you're stronger." Adrian nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. He tried to speak again, and this time Elena heard a whisper of sound. "What?" she asked, leaning closer. "Thank you," Adrian whispered, his voice barely audible. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. "For what?" "Staying," he whispered. That night, Elena called everyone with the news. Her parents cried with joy. Mrs. Blackwell rushed to the hospital and broke down in tears when she saw her son's eyes open and focus on her face. "Adrian, sweetheart, do you know who I am?" she asked. "Mom," Adrian whispered, and Mrs. Blackwell sobbed. Dr. Roberts explained that Adrian's recovery would be gradual. His muscles were weak from 3 years of inactivity. His speech would improve with therapy. His memories of the time before the accident might return slowly or not at all. "The important thing is that his cognitive function appears to be intact," Dr. Roberts said. "He understands what's happening around him, he recognizes people, and he can communicate. That's extraordinary after such a long period of unconsciousness." Over the next few days, Adrian grew stronger. His voice became clearer, though he tired easily. He asked Elena to explain their marriage and she told him the whole story, her family's financial crisis, his mother's proposal, the wedding ceremony where he couldn't participate. "I'm sorry," Elena said when she finished the explanation. "I know it wasn't fair to you." Adrian was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally he said, "Were you lonely? Before?" "Yes," Elena admitted. "Me too," he said simply. "Maybe it was meant to happen this way." Elena's heart skipped. "You're not angry? Should I be angry at someone who took care of me when I couldn't take care of myself? Someone who fought for me when everyone else had given up hope?" Elena realized he was right. The doctors had told her that without her consistent presence and stimulation, Adrian might never have progressed to the minimally conscious state that allowed his recovery. "I heard you," Adrian said quietly. "Not everything, not all the time, but I heard your voice. It was like a light in the darkness." Elena felt overwhelmed by emotion. "I didn't know if you could hear me. I couldn't respond, but I could listen. You told me about your life, your family, your dreams. You read me poetry and news articles. You made me feel less alone." "You were never alone," Elena said firmly. "Even when I wasn't here, I was thinking about you." Adrian smiled for the first time since waking up. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and happier. "I'd like to get to know you properly," he said. "If you want to." "I'd like that too," Elena said. "And Elena?" "Yes. I don't want to end the marriage. I want to see if we can make it real." Elena felt her heart soar. "Are you sure? You barely know me." "I know you're kind and loyal and brave," Adrian said. "I know you saved my life in more ways than one. I know you could have walked away after the ceremony, but you didn't. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." "There's a lot you don't know about me yet," Elena warned. "Then we'll have fun discovering it together," Adrian said, reaching for her hand with fingers that were growing stronger every day. As Elena squeezed his hand, she marveled at how different this felt from all those one-sided conversations during his coma. Now Adrian was squeezing back, not just responding to her presence but actively choosing to connect with her. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now I get stronger," Adrian said. "I learn to walk again, to live in the world again. And we figure out how to be married for real instead of just on paper." Elena smiled. "I'd like that very much." "Good," Adrian said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "Because I think I'm already falling in love with my wife." Elena's heart melted completely. "I think I'm falling in love with my husband too." It wasn't the way either of them had planned to fall in love, but sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected beginnings. Adrian's recovery was faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks of waking up, he was sitting up in bed for longer periods and having full conversations. His memory of the 3 years before the accident was mostly intact, though he had no recollection of the crash itself. Physical therapy was challenging. Adrian's muscles had atrophied during his coma, and he had to relearn basic movements. Elena was there for most of his sessions, cheering him on as he struggled to hold a cup or take a few steps with assistance. "I used to run marathons," Adrian said one day, frustrated after a particularly difficult session where he had managed to walk only a few feet with a walker. "You'll run again," Elena assured him. "It just takes time." "How can you be so patient with me?" he asked. "I'm not the man you married. I'm weak and slow and can't even walk to the bathroom by myself." Elena sat down beside his bed. "Adrian, I married you when you couldn't move or speak at all. Do you think I care if you need help walking right now?" "But you didn't choose this," Adrian said. "You were forced into it. Now you're stuck with a disabled husband instead of the successful businessman you agreed to marry." Elena felt a flash of anger. "Is that what you think? That I'm only here because I'm stuck? Aren't you?" Elena stood up and faced him directly. "Adrian Blackwell, I am here because I want to be. I stay because I choose to stay. Yes, our marriage started as an arrangement, but it's not an arrangement anymore. At least not for me." Adrian looked surprised by her intensity. "I have spent months caring about you, worrying about you, fighting for you when everyone else had given up. I have lived in your apartment, handled your business, represented your interests, and yes, I have fallen in love with you. Not with your money or your success or your ability to walk. I fell in love with the man who squeezed my hand in the dark, who listened to me read poetry, who somehow made me feel less alone even while he was unconscious." Elena's voice broke slightly. "So don't you dare suggest that I'm here out of obligation. I'm here because this is where I want to be." Adrian stared at her for a long moment, then held out his hand. "I'm sorry. You're right. I was feeling sorry for myself instead of appreciating what we have. Elena took his hand, her anger fading as quickly as it had come. We both have some adjusting to do. Elena? Yes. I love you too. I wanted you to know that. Elena felt her heart flutter. It was the first time either of them had said the words directly. I love you too, she said, leaning down to kiss him softly. It was their first real kiss as a married couple, and it felt like sealing a promise they had both been afraid to make. Over the following weeks, Adrian grew stronger and more independent. He graduated from a walker to a cane, then to walking short distances on his own. His coordination improved daily, and his energy levels increased. More importantly, Elena and Adrian were learning to be a real couple. They talked for hours about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. Adrian told her about feeling lonely despite his success, about how work had become his whole life because he hadn't found anyone who truly understood him. Elena shared her own struggles, growing up with financial insecurity, watching her parents work multiple jobs just to make ends meet, her fear that she wasn't smart enough or sophisticated enough for Adrian's world. You're the strongest person I know, Adrian told her one evening as they sat together in his hospital room. You saved your family, you saved me, and you did it all with grace and kindness. I don't feel strong, Elena admitted. I feel scared most of the time. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Adrian said. It's doing the right thing despite being afraid. They also talked about practical matters. Adrian would need months of continued therapy. Some of his motor skills might never return to exactly what they were before. He would have to ease back into running his company gradually. What do you want to do? Adrian asked Elena one day. About work, I mean. You gave up your job at the library to take care of my affairs. Elena had been thinking about this. I'd like to go back to work eventually, but maybe not at the library. I've learned a lot about business over the past few months. Maybe I could do something with that. You could work for the company, Adrian suggested. You've already been making decisions about charitable giving and community programs. You're good at it. You'd want me to work with you? I'd want you to work with me, for me, above me, whatever makes you happy. You're my partner now, Elena. In everything. 6 weeks after waking up, Adrian was discharged from the hospital. Elena had prepared his apartment carefully, making sure everything he needed was within easy reach. She had also made some changes to make the space feel more like theirs instead of just his. You moved things, Adrian observed as they walked through the apartment together. Is that okay? I wanted it to feel like our home, not just your home where I happen to live. Adrian smiled and pulled her close, his balance much steadier now. It's perfect. Although I have a confession. What? I want to carry you over the threshold properly. The way I should have when we first got married. Elena laughed. Adrian, you're still recovering. Don't hurt yourself trying to be romantic. I'm strong enough, he insisted. And I want to do this right. Before Elena could protest further, Adrian scooped her up in his arms. He was stronger than she expected, and he carried her across the threshold of their apartment with only a slight wobble. Welcome home, Mrs. Blackwell, he said, setting her down gently and kissing her. Welcome home, Mr. Blackwell, Elena replied. That night, they had dinner together at the dining room table. Their first meal as a truly married couple. Adrian had insisted on cooking, though Elena stayed close by in case he needed help. This is nice, Elena said, looking around at their home, at Adrian's face in the candlelight, at the life they were building together. It is, Adrian agreed. Elena? Yes. I know our marriage didn't start in a conventional way, but I want you to know that I meant what I said in the hospital. I want to make this real, make it last. I want to build a life with you. Elena felt tears of happiness gathering in her eyes. I want that too. Then I have something for you, Adrian said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small jewelry box and set it on the table between them. Elena opened it to find a beautiful engagement ring. Not huge or flashy, but elegant and perfect. I know we're already married, Adrian said, but I wanted to ask you properly. Elena Martinez Blackwell, will you marry me? For real this time? Elena looked at the ring, then at Adrian's hopeful face, then at the life they had somehow created together against all odds. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, I'll marry you for real. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, where it joined the simple wedding band she had worn for months. But now both rings meant something completely different. Now they were symbols of choice, of love, of a future they would build together. As they held hands across the dinner table, Elena marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had started as the most unsettling arrangement imaginable had become the greatest love story of her life. Planning their second wedding was completely different from their first. Instead of a sterile hospital ceremony with an unconscious groom, Elena and Adrian were planning a celebration of the love they had discovered together. "I don't want anything huge," Elena said as they sat in Adrian's office at Blackwell Industries, looking through wedding magazines Sarah had brought them. "Just our families and close friends." "What about the garden at the house?" Adrian suggested. He had taken Elena to see his family's estate outside the city the week before. It was a beautiful property with rolling lawns and flower gardens that would be perfect for a spring wedding. "That sounds wonderful," Elena agreed. Adrian was back at work part-time, easing into his responsibilities gradually. His recovery continued to amaze everyone. Dr. Chin said he was regaining strength and coordination faster than most patients who had been unconscious for such a long time. "It's because he has something to live for now," Dr. Chin had told Elena privately. "Love is a powerful motivator for healing." Elena had also started working at Blackwell Industries, officially as Director of Community Relations but really as Adrian's partner in all the company's charitable activities. She discovered she had a talent for identifying worthy causes and managing donation programs. "You're a natural at this," Sarah told her one afternoon as they reviewed applications for the company's scholarship fund. "Mr. Blackwell is lucky to have you." Elena smiled. "I'm the lucky one." But not everything was perfect. As Adrian grew stronger and more independent, some of the protective feelings Elena had developed during his recovery began to shift. She sometimes worried that Adrian felt obligated to love her because she had cared for him during his illness. "Do you ever wonder if we only fell in love because of the circumstances?" Elena asked one evening as they prepared dinner together in their apartment. Adrian paused in his chopping vegetables. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe I only fell in love with you because I felt responsible for you. And maybe you only think you love me because I was there when you woke up. Maybe without the coma and the arranged marriage, we never would have given each other a second look." Adrian set down his knife and turned to face her fully. "Elena, do you remember what you told me about courage being doing the right thing despite being afraid?" "Yes. I think love is similar. Real love isn't just about perfect circumstances or initial attraction. It's about choosing to care for someone, to build a life with them, to support them through difficulties. You did all of that for me when I couldn't do anything for you in return. That's not circumstantial love. That's the deepest kind of love there is." Elena felt her doubts beginning to fade. "But what if you had met me at a party or something before the accident? Would you have been interested?" Adrian considered this seriously. "Honestly, I might not have noticed you at first. I was focused on work, on maintaining my image, on dating women who looked good on my arm but didn't challenge me to be better. But if I had really gotten to know you, your kindness, your strength, your intelligence, I would have fallen for you completely." "How can you be sure?" "Because I've seen who you are when things get difficult. I've seen you make sacrifices for people you love. I've seen you fight for what's right even when it's scary. Those are the qualities that matter in a lifelong partner, not whether someone catches your eye across a crowded room." Elena felt tears gathering. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "Good scared or bad scared?" "Good scared. Like standing at the edge of a cliff and deciding to jump because you trust you can fly." Adrian laughed and pulled her into his arms. "Then let's fly together." Their second wedding took place on a beautiful Saturday in May, exactly 1 year after their first ceremony. The garden at the Blackwell estate was in full bloom, with roses and jasmine creating a natural cathedral. Elena wore a flowing white dress that was nothing like the simple outfit she had worn to their hospital wedding. This dress was for celebration, for joy, for the beginning of their real life together. Adrian looked handsome in his dark suit, standing at the altar with strength and confidence that would have been impossible just a few months earlier. When Elena walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Adrian's face lit up with such happiness that several guests began crying before the ceremony even started. The vows they wrote for each other were nothing like the standard words they had spoken in the hospital. "Elena," Adrian said, his voice clear and strong, "you found me when I was lost, loved me when I couldn't love myself, and fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. You turned an arrangement into a romance, a business deal into a love story. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of the faith you had in me." Elena's voice shook with emotion as she spoke her vows. "Adrian, you taught me that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. You showed me that real love isn't about perfect circumstances. It's about choosing each other every day, no matter what challenges we face. I promise to keep choosing you for the rest of my life." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, For the second time but truly for the first, Adrian and Elena kissed with all the passion and joy that had been missing from their first wedding. The reception was everything their first wedding hadn't been, full of laughter, dancing, and celebration. Elena's parents danced together for the first time in years, her mother's health much improved thanks to the treatments they could now afford. Mrs. Blackwell gave a speech about how proud she was of both Elena and Adrian for finding love in the most unlikely circumstances. Some people searched their whole lives for their soulmate, Mrs. Blackwell said, raising her champagne glass. My son and daughter-in-law found each other in the dark and chose to walk into the light together. That's the kind of love that lasts forever. As the evening wound down, Elena and Adrian swayed together on the dance floor, surrounded by the people who loved them most. No regrets? Adrian asked, spinning Elena gently. About what? About agreeing to marry a stranger in a coma. About giving up your quiet life to take care of someone you'd never met. About falling in love with a man who might never have woken up. Elena smiled up at her husband, her real husband, her chosen husband. Adrian, marrying you in that hospital room was the best decision I ever made. Not because of how it turned out but because it led me to you. Even though I was unconscious for most of our first year of marriage? Especially because of that, Elena said. It gave us time to fall in love with who we really are, not just what we look like or what we can offer each other. How many couples can say they fell in love with each other's souls first? Adrian twirled her around the dance floor, both of them laughing with pure joy. Around them, the garden was lit with fairy lights and filled with the scent of roses. It was perfect, but it wasn't the perfection that made Elena happy. It was the man she was dancing with, the life they had built together, the love they had chosen despite impossible odds. I love you, Mrs. Blackwell, Adrian whispered in her ear. I love you too, Mr. Blackwell, Elena replied. They were the same words they had spoken in the hospital, but now they meant everything. 2 years later, Elena stood in the nursery of their new house, holding their 3-month-old daughter, Sophia. The room was painted soft yellow with white furniture and filled with books. Both Adrian and Elena had insisted that their daughter would grow up surrounded by stories. She's going to be a reader like her mama, Adrian said, coming up behind Elena and wrapping his arms around both his wife and daughter. Or a business genius like her daddy, Elena replied, watching as Sophia's tiny fingers grasped at the air. They had bought the house 6 months ago, wanting more space to grow their family. It was a beautiful colonial with a big backyard where Sophia could play when she got older. Adrian was fully recovered now, running his company with more passion than ever, while Elena had started a non-profit organization focused on literacy programs for underprivileged children. Sometimes I can't believe this is real, Elena said, leaning back against Adrian's chest. What part? All of it. This house, our daughter, being married to my best friend. 3 years ago I was a single librarian worried about paying my mother's medical bills. Now look at us. You know what I think about sometimes? Adrian said, rocking slightly to help soothe Sophia. What? That car accident probably saved my life in more ways than one. Elena turned in his arms, careful not to disturb the baby. What do you mean? I was so focused on work, so isolated from real relationships. I probably would have lived my whole life never knowing what it felt like to be truly loved or to love someone completely. The accident forced me to slow down, to be vulnerable, to let someone else take care of me for once. You would have found love eventually, Elena protested. Maybe. But I don't think I would have found this kind of love. The kind that's built on really knowing each other, on weathering difficulties together, on choosing each other every single day. Sophia made a small sound, and both parents looked down at her with identical expressions of wonder. She's perfect, Elena whispered. She gets that from her mother, Adrian said, kissing Elena's forehead. I can't take all the credit. She has your eyes. And your stubborn streak, I bet. Elena laughed. Definitely my stubborn streak. She's going to need it. They stood there in comfortable silence, holding their daughter and each other, watching the sunset through the nursery window. It had been a long journey from that sterile hospital room to this moment, but every step had been worth it. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message. She shifted Sophia to one arm and checked it. It's from Rebecca Chase, she told Adrian, surprised. Your old girlfriend Rebecca? Elena had met Rebecca several more times at business events, and their relationship had evolved from hostile to merely cool. What does she want? Elena read the message aloud. Congratulations on your beautiful daughter. I saw the birth announcement in the society pages. I wanted you both to know that I think you have something really special. I was wrong about your marriage and I'm sorry for the things I said. You two are perfect together. Adrian looked amazed. I never thought I'd see the day when Rebecca Chase admitted she was wrong about anything. People change, Elena said diplomatically. Some people do. The right people do. Elena's parents arrived for dinner an hour later, as they did every Sunday. Elena's mother was in full remission now and looked healthier than she had in years. Her father had started a small consulting business that was doing well. The family financial crisis that had led to Elena's arranged marriage was a distant memory. "How's my beautiful granddaughter?" Elena's mother asked, immediately reaching for Sophia. "Perfect as always," Elena replied, handing over the baby. During dinner, they talked about Elena's nonprofit, which had just received a major grant to expand their reading programs to 3 more cities. Adrian's company was also doing well, having landed several major contracts in the past year. "You two make quite a team," Elena's father observed. "We do," Adrian agreed, taking Elena's hand across the dinner table. After Elena's parents left, Adrian and Elena settled on the couch together while Sophia slept in her bassinet nearby. They had developed a routine of spending this quiet evening time together, talking about their day and their plans for the future. "I have something to tell you," Adrian said, and something in his tone made Elena look at him carefully. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about stepping back from the company. Not retiring completely, but maybe bringing in a CEO to handle day-to-day operations while I focus on the bigger picture stuff." Elena was surprised. "Really? Why?" "Because I don't want to miss Sophia growing up the way my father missed parts of my childhood. Because I want to travel with you and see all those places you used to dream about when you were reading to me in the hospital. Because I've learned that success means nothing if you don't have people to share it with." Elena felt her heart swell with love for this man who had grown so much from the workaholic he had been before his accident. "What would you do with all that free time?" she asked. "Help you expand your literacy program. Maybe write a book about second chances. Definitely spend a lot more time with my wife and daughter." "I think that sounds wonderful," Elena said, snuggling closer to him on the couch. "There's one more thing," Adrian said, and now he sounded nervous. "What?" "I want to renew our vows." Elena sat up and looked at him in confusion. "Adrian, we just had our real wedding 2 years ago." "I know, but I want to do it again. Every year, on the anniversary of the day I woke up. I want to keep choosing you, keep promising to love you, keep celebrating the fact that we found each other against all odds." Elena felt tears gathering in her eyes. "You want to marry me every year?" "For the rest of our lives," Adrian confirmed. "If you'll have me." "Adrian Blackwell," Elena said, laughing through her tears, "you are the most romantic man alive." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes to everything. To renewing our vows every year, to you stepping back from work, to building the most beautiful life possible together." Adrian kissed her softly, and Elena marveled once again at how perfectly they fit together. Everything about their love story had been unconventional: the arranged marriage, the comatose groom, the months of one-sided conversations, the gradual awakening that had changed both their lives forever. But maybe that was what made it perfect. They hadn't fallen in love at first sight or bonded over shared interests at a party. They had chosen each other in the darkest circumstances and built something beautiful from the most unlikely beginning. As they sat together in their living room, with their daughter sleeping peacefully nearby and their whole future stretching out ahead of them, Elena thought about that scared young woman who had stood at the foot of a hospital bed 3 years ago, preparing to marry a stranger. That woman could never have imagined that she was about to embark on the greatest adventure of her life. She couldn't have known that the man lying unconscious in that bed would become her best friend, her greatest love, her partner in everything that mattered. "Do you think Sophia will understand our story when she's older?" Elena asked. "I think she'll understand that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places," Adrian replied. "And that real love isn't about perfect circumstances. It's about choosing each other every day no matter what." "Will you tell her about the hand squeezes? About how you were listening even when you couldn't respond?" "I'll tell her that her mother's voice brought me back to life," Adrian said. "I'll tell her that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and that when 2 people are meant to be together, nothing can keep them apart, not time, not circumstances, not even consciousness itself." Elena smiled, thinking about all the stories they would tell their daughter as she grew up. Stories about courage and hope and the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. "I love our story," Elena said. "Even the scary parts? Even the uncertain parts?" "Especially those parts," Elena replied. "They make the happy ending even better." Sophia stirred in her bassinet, making the small sounds that meant she would be waking up soon. Elena and Adrian both moved to check on her, their movements perfectly synchronized after years of partnership. As Elena picked up their daughter and Adrian wrapped his arms around both of them, Elena felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. It hadn't been easy and it certainly hadn't been conventional, but it had been theirs. And it was perfect. Outside, the sun was setting over their neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Inside their home, a family that had been born from the most unlikely circumstances settled in for another evening together, secure in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious in each other. Elena looked up at her husband, the man she had married in a hospital room, fallen in love with during his long sleep, and chosen again and again every day since, and knew that their story was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. "I love you, Adrian," she whispered. "I love you too, Elena," he replied, kissing the top of their daughter's head. "Forever and always." And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the Blackwell family began another evening in their beautiful, impossible, perfectly imperfect life together, a life that had begun with the most unsettling arrangement imaginable and had become the greatest love story any of them could have dreamed. Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings start in the darkest places. Sometimes love finds a way even when every logical thing says it shouldn't work. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to take a leap of faith with a stranger, you discover that stranger was exactly who you were meant to spend your life with all along. Elena had learned all of this and more in the 3 years since she had stood at the foot of Adrian's hospital bed, terrified and uncertain about the future. Now, holding her husband and daughter close, she knew that every scary moment, every uncertain day, every difficult decision had been worth it to get to this perfect, ordinary, extraordinary evening with the people she loved most in the world. Their love story would continue for decades to come, filled with new adventures, new challenges and new joys. But it would always be built on the foundation they had created in those quiet hospital room conversations, when Elena had chosen to stay and Adrian had chosen to fight his way back to consciousness and love. It was, Elena thought as she watched Adrian make silly faces at their giggling daughter, the most beautiful story she had ever been part of. And the best part was that it was theirs to write together, one day at a time for the rest of their lives.